Happy Monday, everybody. It is anniversary week Monday. Welcome to the Morning Update Show. I am your co-host, Trey Holiday, and you guys know my guy right here, Big O. What's up, Big O? Happy Monday.
If you don't know, you better know. This is our anniversary week, man. I mean, we super excited. I like to tell people, along this journey, we didn't come this far just to come this far.
That's right.
Welcome to the Morning Update Show. Happy Monday to you. Want to remind you, this is a perfect opportunity to tag and share this stream with someone that you know that would appreciate culturally relevant news and information emanating from here in the Emerald City. We got a great show lined up today. Yeah. We've got Nikita Oliver in the building. Yeah. They are running for D9. That's D9. City council. That's the whole city, the whole municipality. So we'll be talking to Nikita Oliver. We got the majority of the show actually reserved for that. Before we jump into the headlines, though, how was your weekend?
It was great. It was great. You know what? It's from family time. Enjoyed myself. How about you? I know you were busy working, man.
Grind time, baby. We've been on it. We've been promoting it. And by the way, if you didn't know, and you're going to hear it about 1,000 times this week, Friday, 7 p.m., the 1-year anniversary of the Morning Update Show, broadcasting live from the State Hotel in downtown Seattle, as well as our studios right here. But then also Thursday, and we'll talk about this, Community Voices is back. We haven't done Community Voices in a while, but Community Voices Vanishing Seattle edition. We hooked up with Vanishing Seattle. It's going to be 2 episodes, one this Thursday and one next Thursday. And we're looking at some of the neighborhoods that have been impacted by change, gentrification, as we know, rising rents, development. This week, we're looking at the University District, and we're also looking at Chinatown International District. Then next Thursday is the Central District in Ballard.
Wow. Great lineup, man.
Yeah, so we'll get right into it. And it's like this clearly brings the tone down some, but this is, man, very serious. It's been 1 year since the police killed Breonna Taylor. And we have a segment here about looking back 1 year and what's occurred.
The rally held in honor of Breonna Taylor to mark the anniversary of her death in a botched police raid. Her mother insisting she will continue to fight to see the officers involved face criminal charges. ABC's Faith Abube joins us from the Department of Justice in Washington with more. Faith, good morning.
Hey, good morning to you, Whit. The U.S. Justice Department has been quietly conducting a civil rights investigation into Breonna Taylor's death, giving her mother and her supporters some hope for possible charges. Overnight, a demonstration in Los Angeles marking the 1-year anniversary of Breonna Taylor's death turning violent. Watch as these two demonstrators climb on the hood of a police car as the officer speeds away. These images a stark contrast to the peaceful protests seen across the country, from Portland to Louisville. That familiar rallying cry echoing through the street. The movement sparked by the 26-year-old's death still honoring her legacy. Fighting for justice, they say, still hasn't come.
I said it's been 365 days, and we still don't have any justice.
It was March 13th, 2020. These Louisville police officers broke down Taylor's apartment door in a botched raid. Taylor and her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, jumped out of bed in a frenzy and were met with a barrage of police bullets. The young EMT did not survive, her mother telling GMA time hasn't healed her wounds.
They committed a crime and they should be held accountable for it.
Since Taylor's death, the city of Louisville has passed Breonna's law banning no-knock warrants. The police department also making several changes, but not one of the 3 police officers has been charged in Taylor's death. The Kentucky State Attorney General has said the officers' use of deadly force that night was justified, but Taylor's supporters not giving up.
We are here fighting to make sure that it does not happen to you tonight.
Breonna's boyfriend suing the Louisville Police Department and the officers involved in her deadly shooting.
Well, this morning I woke up thinking of justice.
Since her death, Taylor's name is now synonymous with the Protect Black Women movement. Activists across the country making sure the world won't forget her name.
It's a good day for the DOJ to come and arrest the cops who killed Breonna.
And President Biden tweeted his support for Breonna Taylor's family yesterday during that anniversary, adding that he's committed to passing police reform.
Trey Holiday.
I mean, this right here is, something that I'm so glad people are continuing to press for. The fact that the 3 officers have not been charged in Breonna's death for so many, that's why folks are still out there in the streets. Ultimately, they really want to see justice. And when you don't have charges that are being put against these officers, fine, banning no-knock warrants. Okay, great. But ultimately, there's more that needs to happen right here in this case in terms of Breonna Taylor's family actually seeing justice.
Well, the officer that was charged was actually charged for missing, and because he shot an errant bullet into a neighbor's home, wanted endangerment.
Yeah. This is something that I'm glad that people, not just there, but throughout the country, gathered together and galvanized their voices in support of this family really seeing justice. I mean, it has to be done.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about this, I mean, it was this coming up Friday, a year ago, that we went on air, and it was this story and Ahmaud Arbery, a few other stories that were coming out. We're gonna stay on top of this, Breonna Taylor. Another thing that happened late last week was that George Floyd's family made a settlement with the city of Minneapolis, the biggest civil settlement there, $27 million, and one of the biggest pretrial settlements as well.
Late today, George Floyd's family returned to the place he died after hearing the city of Minneapolis would pay them the largest civil settlement of its kind, $27 million.
Even though my brother is not here, he's here with me in my heart, because if I could get him back, I will give all of this back.
It's the biggest pre-trial civil settlement following a police encounter in the U.S., topping the $12 million payout the city of Louisville awarded to the family of Breonna Taylor last year.
We know that no amount of money can ever address the intense pain and trauma caused by his death.
It comes as 7 jurors have been seated in the Derek Chauvin criminal trial. Chauvin is a former police officer who was charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter in Floyd's death last May. He's pleaded not guilty, and his defense team says Floyd's drug use contributed to his death. This week, a judge added another charge of third-degree murder. Today, Floyd's family celebrated as the city council voted unanimously to approve the civil settlement, which also includes $500,000 for the neighborhood where he died.
They can't control what's going to happen in the criminal courts. But what they can do is exhibit responsible leadership in the face of this horrific tragedy that really was a watershed moment for America.
Attorneys for the 4 officers involved in this case did not respond to requests for comment today about that settlement.
Trey?
Yeah, this is historic, but as his brother said there, and I'm sure so many more of his family members would agree 100% that if they could have George back, they would give all of that back. And, again, this is not about money being able to settle anything ultimately. We really do need real reform, real change, real community-led solutions that are going to begin to take shape in the police departments. We've seen this now, Breonna Taylor, 12 million, 27 million to George Floyd's family. I think I'm glad that the city council made nobody was against this, that everybody was for it. But ultimately, this is really about a loss of life. It's not necessarily about the money.
Yeah, I don't think the city council wanted that smoke.
Yeah. They knew it was gonna come, man.
I'll be honest with you. I think that we very well might be set up for the letdown in the George Floyd criminal case. We'll see what happens. They added in the 3rd-degree murder charge, so they can. They're trying to put as many charges on there to make something stick. And in case people think that that's unique, they stack up the charges on Black people all the time.
Yeah, they really do.
You know what I'm saying?
And I gotta say,
it's not unique to see somebody with I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that I also think too, when you talk about they don't want that smoke, this is why people's voices are so important. I highlight it in every chance I can because the collective voice is powerful, man.
Well, I think that what the world witnessed for sure was a crime against humanity. That's what we saw right there. We saw a crime against humanity. 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And a defense is supposed to find a defense. So of course they're going to come up with all kinds of different things for a defense, and that's what they're going to do. But I think that it's undeniable as to what we saw and what played out there. And so we'll see. Of course we're going to continue to follow this, but that was literally 8 minutes, 46 seconds, a crime against humanity that changed the world.
And I'm sorry, O2, you're absolutely right. It was there, present for the world to see. It always makes me think about the families who are dealing with deaths due to police brutality, police abuse of force, police abuse of authority that were not captured, that were not in the public eye. It always makes me think about those folks too, because here we are, we have this swell of voices on a global scale, talking about George Floyd, saying his name. It's undeniable, but it always makes me think about the times that police have really just gotten away with this kind of stuff. Well, other times they may have had the knee on somebody's neck and then, nobody was there to witness it. It just always does make me think about that. We know there's a lot of cases that haven't had this kind of public support and this public swell.
The camera made the difference. Yeah. It was 2 weeks ago, Nikki? 30 years since Rodney King tape came out. So 30 people didn't believe that those kind of things occurred. And it wasn't until that Rodney King tape came out, and that was 30 years ago, that people actually believed. People wouldn't believe. People in Seattle, I think, are one big reason, especially early on, the Western Barricade and the Seattle protests. People in Seattle and across our country and internationally could not believe. And we're still debating, even if we're going to put anything about the protests in our morning update anniversary show. Because looking back at the footage now, it's weird because at the time and even months ago, I could look at it and be like, well, I look at that footage now and I'm like, good God, is this what was really going on?
Yeah.
But it's captured on film. And some of these things being captured on film, whether it's somebody's phone or security cameras and everything else, you just never know what the story would be if it wasn't on video.
So true. So true. And that's why, I like to give reverence to that.
Yeah. And Derek Chauvin showed no regard. He saw they were taping him. Yeah. So, that would tell you right there that he showed no regard, take me, all good. So All right, we got one more. Man, these headlines today is so Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, right? And we talked about this actually the day of the insurrection. There was a congressperson from Oklahoma, forget the congressman's name, but he was already making excuses then. Remember, we called it out on air. He was like, man, well, these are just good people in here and they're patriots. I'm like, man, they've breached the Capitol, they've stored the Capitol, you know, they've illegally occupying the Capitol. But that day, January 6th, the people making excuses, people in Congress making excuses were already making their voices heard. Well, Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, he said that he wasn't really scared on January 6th because the people who stormed the Capitol, those were patriots, good people. What he also said was that if Trump had won and that was Antifa or BLM, then he wouldn't have been scared.
To the increasing pressure on a Republican senator to step down over what many say were racist comments about Black Lives Matter protesters. ABC's Elizabeth Schulze has the very latest now from Capitol Hill. Elizabeth, good morning to you.
Good morning, Whit. Well, Senator Ron Johnson has called the rioters who stormed this building friendly and jovial. But these latest comments go a step further in what some are calling blatant racism.
This morning, Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson facing growing calls to resign over comments he made about the January 6th Capitol riots. In a radio show clip sparking public outcry, Johnson saying he didn't feel threatened by the pro-Trump crowd storming the building, calling them patriots, then adding this.
Had the tables been turned and President Trump won the election, and those were tens of thousands of Black Lives Matter and Antifa protesters, I might have been a little concerned.
Democratic lawmakers accusing Johnson of racism.
Black Lives Matter did protest peacefully at the United States Capitol, and they did not cause trauma, injury, and loss of life, nor did they maim U.S. Capitol Police officers in the way that these so-called patriots did.
Federal prosecutors say more than 300 individuals have been charged in connection to the January 6th attack that left more than 5 people, including a Capitol Police officer, dead. Congressman Ted Lieu pointing out that the rioters were mostly white, tweeting, "Dear Senator Ron Johnson, your white skin color would not have saved you from the white mob." But in a statement to ABC News, Johnson doubling down on the controversial remarks, appearing to cite a study claiming hundreds of Black Lives Matter protests over the summer turned violent, and saying, "That's why I would have been more concerned." The authors of that study telling ABC News it's not an accurate portrayal of the findings, saying 93% of the protests were peaceful.
Now, Senator Johnson's seat is up for re-election next year, and he hasn't yet announced if he intends to run.
Goodness. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Oh, I just gotta say, I mean, you know, here we are again with somebody who we talked about this and we talked about it on January 6th, purely white privilege and the ideas of white supremacy that have really ran rampant in this country are showcased right there in that man's statements. Ultimately, for the study to even come back and say the way that he's trying to represent the findings of the study are incorrect, and to also give data and numbers showcasing 93% of the protests were peaceful. I can sit here and say right here in Seattle, we saw one huge protest in the South End, tons of huge protests throughout the CD, throughout downtown that were so peaceful in regard to Black Lives Mattering in this country. And again, it is not a cry out statement. It is basic saying, look at Black people's lives. They matter. It's not saying they matter more than yours or anything like that, or they should take priority in this and that. It's saying you got to recognize that Black lives do matter. I always go back to the civil rights era. They were just asking for folks to be civil with them. Here we are. All of these movements that have really been about Black liberation and centering Black voices, they come with a sense of peace. We've been doing that time and time again. And ultimately, you can look throughout the history of protests around Black liberation and Black lives being at the center and see the peaceful way that they have actually gone about in multiple cities. So this is, I mean, to me, this is just pure whiteness. You know what I mean? Him being able to, like that guy said, your white skin would not have protected you from the white mob. It's just true, man.
I see Senator Johnson has you fired up this Monday.
Hey, I'm saying, you can't deny what we all saw there on January 6th. I mean, it was really, again, it was against what we call these United States. When we talked about it on that day,
it was an insurrection,
period, point blank.
To try to stop the certification of the election. I think this is part of a bigger issue that we face here in our country. And that is just people not being able to take responsibility. Just there's not enough people who can just say it's wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like, man, this was wrong, right? But as we find time and time again that when it's advantageous for people, then they find excuses for it. And you know what? I think I can kind of find examples of this on several sides of this issue here. Because here you have this senator in Wisconsin who's saying now that these people were patriots and they were good people and he would have been scared of Antifa. And Ron Johnson, he's a Republican, right? But before we go too far down that road, let's look here at Seattle. And all the laws now and the way that the police and society interact with people who are suffering from the opioid crisis. Now, these are Democrats that run our city for the last 30, 40 years over here. So, I mean, from either side of the spectrum, these guys make excuses for their own people. You see what I'm saying? I mean, so when you look at Seattle, so that's fine. Ron Johnson, I mean, it's par for the course for him. And a lot of the people in that party, they're going to make excuses for their people. And it's just like Marcus Harrison Green said that here 30 years ago, super liberal Seattle, Democrats and everything else, that when the kinship caregivers, when it was black babies, they were crack babies, right? But no one's calling these white babies now oxytots, right? Because the concept is different now. Now it's white children. And white people that are impacted by drugs. There is no mandatory minimum for a lot of these drugs that predominantly white people use in Seattle. So the way that I see it is like whether it's Republicans justifying from their side, or rather even here in Seattle and the policies that have been used, it was Democrats that brought in weed and seed. It was Democrats that put all of these, that weaponized all of these policies against us in the Central District of Seattle in their war on drugs. And now look at this drug problem here is overwhelming. But all of a sudden, because the victims now look like them, the policies have changed.
You know what? You're absolutely right. That ultimately it goes back to the fact that what we're doing here and what folks are actually doing is caring for their own kind. We see this all the time. And you are right. I think that one of the things that really behooves me is this. How many more examples do we need to see as a people before we realize how disgusting these practices are? That this is really a way that we can start to wake up in terms of elevating our consciousness to understand new measures need to come into play. Because regardless of who is in power, it's not about a particular party at all. It really is not. It's about the centricity of whiteness here in this nation. That really is what it's about. And ultimately, that's why so many more voices are coming out to the forefront and actually advocating for their communities, advocating for their people, because we see that if we don't do it, nobody else is going to do it for us. Never has been. And honestly, they're going to continue to do exactly what you just described.
I'm going to continue to just call it like I see it. And so, like I said, what Ron Johnson said there was wrong. The way that, and he's a Republican, the way that these Democrats here run the city of Seattle, weaponized all these laws and everything against black people. But now when white people are impacted by drugs, all of a sudden, here's the compassion, here's the resources, here's everything else. They both wrong. We're going to continue to call it like we see it. That's why it's the Morning Update Show. All right, we got Nikita Oliver in the building. You know, this is handcrafted right here. I handcrafted that. You see what I'm saying? I don't skip over any of these anymore. It's handcrafted. We've got Nikita Oliver in the building. They are going to talk about the run, Nikita for 9, District 9, a citywide seat. We're going to take a short break right now. You're going to love these 2 commercials. They're brand new. You've never seen them before. I'll give you a hint. One of them is about the anniversary. You're watching the Morning Update Show.
The Seattle Association of Black Journalists presents the Morning Update Show 1-year anniversary special this Friday, March 19th at 7 p.m. Join the Converge Media family as we broadcast live from the State Hotel in downtown Seattle, and we take a look back at the last 12 months of the Morning Update Show and a glance towards the future. This is a night you won't want to miss and definitely won't forget, as we're also joined by Julia Jesse, Basa Gordon, Marcus, Harrison Green, Jake Gravbrot, Be Unique, Dre's, Eric Calligraphy, Bobby Stills, Mike Davis, Carlos Imani, Willard Jimerson, G-Prez Aspie, DJ Topspin, and more. Woo! So save the date this Friday, March 19th at 7 p.m. across all Converge Media platforms.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Community Voices returns for 2021 with 2 very special episodes that examine the shifting demographics and cultures of Seattle. Converge Media proudly presents Community Voices, the Vanishing Seattle edition. This is a 2-part special that examines 4 Seattle neighborhoods: the Central District, Chinatown International District, the University District, and Ballard, all Seattle neighborhoods that have experienced great change and displacement due to gentrification, rising rents, and development, as well as found creative ways to stay rooted and resilient. Also, all neighborhoods that have a long and proud history, culture, and traditions that combined help shape the face of the Emerald City as we know it today. The Community Voices episodes will include films plus discussions with local small business owners and community members. These are 2 powerful live episodes that you will not want to miss. So make sure and save the date, March 18th and March 25th at 7 p.m. across all Converge Media platforms. Presented by the City of Seattle Department of Neighborhoods and Vanishing Seattle.
All right, that's the Vanishing Seattle. That special is Thursday. It's a big week for us. Thursday, 7 o'clock. Special time for that. Clapback Culture is actually going to be at 6 o'clock on Thursday. And we've got Vanishing Seattle on 7 o'clock on Thursday. And we're looking at the Chinatown International District and the University District. And wasn't that a great voice on there?
I was just about to say.
That's the big fella himself, Jake Gravbrot.
Man, Jake, the man of many talents. I love it, Jake. And as you guys can see in that anniversary commercial clip, I was sporting debonair decor there. I'm sporting it again today. You guys can visit that amazing Black-owned business in the Pacific Place Mall. Our guy, doing really great things and really great product. Shout out to you, Debonair Decor.
Upscale shopping experience too, Pacific Place. All right, so man, it's heating up. It's that time of year. We've got lots of names in the hat, all kinds of different people running for positions and everything else. Last week, Nikita Oliver announced with a video. And it's a type of video I hadn't seen before. We aired it here. Let's play it right now.
Pay homage to the Duwamish, Suquamish, and the tribes upon whose lands and waterways we traverse. I cannot claim this land, but here I find home, so I pay real rent. A rising tide may lift all boats, but we ain't all got boats to catch the ride. So we fight, not to get swept away by the rip tides. We demand repair and reparations, native sovereignty and Black liberation. Together, all oppressed peoples, we change our situation, letting go of all that weighs us down, that we might fly beyond prisons and police. No more loved ones living on the streets. We stop in all the sweeps. People over profit becomes our beliefs. Everyone's essential. Good food, clean water is always in reach. Health is wealth and everyone deserves it. When we sow better, then better is what we reap. And we will write the story of how the I became we, the we became free, and how it came to be this Emerald City by the sea.
All right, before we jump into it, it's a good time to remind people, share the stream. We have a city council candidate for D9, Nikita Oliver. Welcome to the Morning Update Show.
Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations. 1-year anniversary. Couldn't be happier to be here on the Monday of that important event.
Well, thank you. And you've actually had several appearances between the Morning Update Show, Community Voices. You were actually, I think, on our very first episode of Community Voices.
I believe I was.
That we launched there. So, you know, you've had some appearances here on Converge. First of all, you know, there's a bunch of questions that we ask everybody. We've had a few candidates running for mayor and also city council. And so we'll start off with this. Why are you running for city council position D9 citywide?
Yeah, because unprecedented crisis requires unprecedented investments in recovery. You know, reality is our city was not prepared for the 4 crises that we encountered in 2020, racial justice uprising and pandemic and economic recession. And we're seeing all of these things in the midst of a climate catastrophe. While our city lacks affordable housing, has more folks without homes than ever before, we need people who are willing to bring not just bold responses, but community-based ones. And I've been a part of grassroots movements for almost my entire duration, my time in Seattle. And I believe those movements have shifted the culture of our city already, and we should continue to shift the policies.
Right. And now the city of Seattle, 11,000 employees. I think there's 35 department heads that report into the city. A city council that's fractured, frosty at times. They got a good family picture though. You see the city council family picture there. I mean, being on the city council and a population of 700,000 plus here in the city and all kinds of dynamics going on. What are your qualifications to run for city council and to be elected?
Well, first of all, I think any person who graduates and moves through our common schooling curriculum should be qualified to serve as an elected official in our government. Otherwise, it's inaccessible. It's supposed to be a government for the people, by the people. So I think sometimes when we ask these questions about qualification, we actually devalue the qualifications of people who should be able to sit in those seats and construct it around a white notion of viability. That being said, I think I have checked all those boxes that make me viable even within the context of whiteness. I have a law degree, I have a bar card, I am a grassroots organizer, I'm an artist, I'm a renter, I'm also the child of someone who experienced incarceration. There are a lot of things both within my professional lived experience that I think make me a great candidate, not just based on my interests, but based on the things that I've done within our city, presently working on things like the Youth Achievement Center with Community Passageways and the Africatown Community Land Trust to develop a community held and owned facility that has co-located housing and services and sustainable food options. I mean, and these are the kinds of things that will transform our city when we think about the housing crisis and the issues that we're facing.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you actually highlight there. And honestly, my question is, you know, you talk about, you know, community grassroots and really being planted in community. How do you really see that taking shape and taking form in this council seat position for District 9?
Yeah, so a huge part of the campaign will take lessons from our 2017 mayoral race, which is that if you really want a platform that's transformative for those communities that are most marginalized, most impacted by anti-Black policies and anti-Indigenous policies, that policy has to actually be developed by and in partnership with those most impacted communities. So we developed something that a lot of campaigns have taken on since then, which was a listening post model. We have our 9 core things that we know in our city we need to focus on because movements have made them known, but we also need to make sure we're getting to the tables in community with folks that are most impacted by those issues, building the policy that will change the material conditions that people are living in. People know how to create policies that change their lives. They may not be able to write it into the words that ultimately become ordinance, but by talking about their lived experience and what would make their lives easier, healthier, wholer, we can actually write policies that change the material conditions that people are living in. So a huge part of our campaign will go back to using that strategy of developing policy in community with folks, not expecting them to come to City Hall on City Hall's time, but going to people where they're at, bringing food, bringing fellowship, bringing conversation and opportunity to write that policy. I think the second thing is really thinking about how City Hall has worked. I hate our budgeting process. We have about a month where the budget becomes transparent and accessible. It's hard to read, it's hard to know how to advocate, and then it moves very quickly for about a 6-week period. So those communities that really deserve the opportunity to advocate for changes in our budgetary allocations never really get that space because it moves too quickly and it's inaccessible. So using the model we built with the solidarity budget, continuing to expand who's involved in that process. And then I do think that even though there are things to be worked out with participatory budgeting, continuing to expand the democratic process and how we do budgetary allocations is key to making sure those communities that are most marginalized actually get to have a say in how we spend the well over $6 billion budget that the city of Seattle has.
Right. And you're with us for the rest of the show, right? You gonna stick with us?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Because I got some questions. And then, the Twitter sphere has some questions as well. So, Nikita, I guess the best way for it, what is your vision of policing in the short term? And when I say short term, I say like the next 5 years or 10 years of policing in Seattle, because depending on who you talk to in the city, we get different ideas about you, and also the term abolition. What is this? Maybe you want to take a second to explain, even to myself, what is your vision of policing, of what policing should look like here in Seattle, say over the next 5 or 10 years?
So I'm going to speak to what is our vision of public health and public safety, because policing is used within the context of our city as one of the means by which we attempt to create that. The problem is policing does not create that for everyone within our city. I am an abolitionist, which means my goal is to create the conditions by which things like policing in prisons, punitive, harmful systems that are very anti-Black at their root, are actually rendered obsolete because we're meeting the basic needs: housing, healthcare, mental health care, food sustainability, clean water, access to transportation and technology. These are all things that can actually make our community safer because people's needs are met. So my vision for the next 5 to 10 years of our city is one in which we have actually started to really achieve our goals around affordable social housing. We've been dependent upon a private market that has no incentive to actually respond to the housing needs of our community members. We also have a very racist zoning code. Like the way in which we determine where affordable housing is built, where multifamily units are, is very problematic. And it's based in a 1923 comprehensive plan that all the way up through the 90s continued to downzone neighborhoods to allow more single family housing. So as a result, we've actually still allowed de jure segregation to exist. So I really am thinking about the conditions that people are living in as our means of addressing the issues of policing. These are interconnecting things. And I think a lot of folks would try to pigeonhole me into thinking I only care about defunding the police. But really the flip side of dismantling oppressive structures is building the ones that create the conditions that people can thrive in.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, being out there in the streets with you all these time, I think that I've understood a lot of that. And one of my questions is, when you were just talking about it, because we do have 700,000 people in the city of Seattle, how do we really work to ensure that the voices that have not been a part of the process with regard to whether it is participatory budgeting or other measures, even with the solidarity budget, how do we ensure that those voices are really at the center of a process that everybody gets to vote on?
Yeah, I think, one thing that we really struggle with in our state is I-200 has really prevented our ability to have targeted responses for Black communities, for Native communities that address issues based on a highly racialized system that has purposely disenfranchised people based on race, right? So I do think we need council members, we need representatives that are willing to tackle that I-200 issue. We got very close. Almost there. It's an issue we need to keep bringing up. I think the second is really having intersectional understanding of who it is that is most marginalized in our city, really thinking about Black trans women and understanding the impacts that criminalization, the way in which we pathologize people, the lack of access to work actually marginalizes communities like the Black trans community, including our Black trans elders. We don't hear a lot about queer and trans elders because often the level of marginalization and disenfranchisement that they have experienced means that they don't survive. There is literally a genocide against Black trans people. And so bringing those folks into the work. So I've been meeting regularly with the Black Trans Task Force as a part of developing this campaign to develop an agenda for Black trans liberation as a part of the work that we're doing, and thinking through what city policies on a mechanic level can actually transform the way in which Black trans folks get to exist in the city of Seattle. How does this become a safer place? I think similarly, we can do that work with lots of folks, thinking about our elders that are in the midst of this housing crisis, some of them losing their homes because they cannot keep up on the cost of taxation and on the cost of mortgages, right? So we really have to target our responses to the things that we know people are suffering with, our formerly incarcerated family members who are not getting the reentry services they deserve. And so as a result, are often forced to turn back to things that push them back into the criminal punishment system. It is not a secret to us who is most marginalized in our communities. And so doing the work of going to them, being with them, developing policy with them, it's actually not that hard, but we choose what is efficient over what is effective when we develop policies, and we actually need to move to the space of effectiveness.
Right. So I've got two questions here, both of them from the Twitter sphere.
I love the Twitter sphere.
Man.
Sometimes.
I'm about to say better you than me. This is from Free Imam Jamil Al Amin. Question, why electoralism as a strategy? This summer, I remember Nikita was reading Blood in My Eye. I'm about 95% sure that they read this paragraph below, and I can't go into this whole paragraph. But basically, I think the question is, has your ideas changed as opposed to basically not being in the system to now running for office in the system?
Blood in My Eye is a book by George Jackson. I highly recommend everybody read it because it does have strong critiques of our current system. That particular paragraph that's cited there talks about those who run for office with only the intent to win versus the intent to agitate or disrupt. And so I think inherently in the policies, in the stories, that a candidate such as myself, and honestly a campaign that we have brings to the table, is inherently going to agitate or disrupt the current system of policies. We have to stop pretending that we need to placate to an anti-Black, anti-Indigenous system that purposely disenfranchises people economically so we can have an unpaid or low-wage working group of people that capitalism can continue to exploit. And so part of this campaign is about that disruption point, about bringing those things to the surface while simultaneously bringing policy recommendations that will radically redistribute economic and political power.
All right. And another one, the other Michael C. One, what do you bring to the council that's not currently represented? And man, it's a wide variety of views that are there. And what would be your top priorities for the council over the next few years?
Yeah, so two key priorities. One is thinking about, I think folks believe that I'm not interested in governance because I'm an activist. That's not true. Governance impacts our daily lives all the way down to the material conditions that we live in. One way in which I think the council is poorly constructed is the way that committees are set up. Things like transportation, economics, housing, and zoning actually all need to be within the same committee so we can be thinking about the intersections that all of those areas affect while also having a racial justice lens applied to it. So while as a new council member, I wouldn't necessarily get to decide how committees are constructed, I would get to advocate for that change because I think shifting that would allow us to more effectively develop policies that undo anti-Blackness and allow us to think through better ways to engage communities on issues that intersect. I think the second thing I've already mentioned is our budgetary process is inaccessible, and it is not something that communities most impacted by the justice issues in our city actually can advocate for ourselves in. And so finding ways to elongate that process, make it more accessible, change the language we use in which we do budgetary allocations so that communities, not just those who have access to the information or the time to show up to council meetings in the middle of the day or stay all night with how long as they can go sometimes, but everyone actually gets an opportunity to make those changes. Participatory budgeting is one way to do that. It is not the only way. So there are actually governing shifts that I think we need to make. The third priority has to be affordable housing. And a part of that is changing our zoning laws. 85% of the multifamily zone developments happen on 12% of the land. Over 80% of our city is still zoned for single family dwellings. And we have to grapple with the fact there's a book called The Color of Law by Rothschild that really illuminates how the ways in which redlining directly attaches to determinants in terms of experiences with policing or over-policing, health and well-being, education. All of these things are interconnected, and our housing crisis is at the root of it, and at the root of that is anti-Blackness.
Right. And real quick, I know you got a question, Trey. What different perspective do you feel that you're going to bring to the council? You know, in the city of Seattle, people, a lot of times people say that so many of the council members are center or even to the right. The rest of America would look at our council and say that you're very progressive in a very liberal city. That being said, what is it that you feel you bring to our city council that's not already there?
I'm unapologetically about supporting and caring for Black community. Black folks have to be prioritized. We have been systematically and consistently pushed to the bottom. And many of our council members get afraid at the moment that a majority white city gets upset that we're doing things that benefit Black communities, that upon whom so much has been built. So I think that's one thing that's important to bring. The second thing is I'm not just connected to grassroots movements, I am in grassroots movements. And I have no intention of co-opting grassroots movements and claiming the work, rather partnering with, co-collaborating with, and doing that work in a way that actually honors the folks whose shoulders that it's on. And I think the third thing is just, I have the lived experience. I am a renter. I live in a city where I do not know from year to year whether or not I'm gonna actually get to stay living in this city. I am on the farthest edge of the city right now, almost Skyway, because that's the only place that I can find affordable rent. And so I think having people on the city council who have the lived experience of over-policing, who have the lived experience of working with young people on the south end of the city, who have the lived experience of being a renter, not just for a couple of years, but for my entire duration here in the city. And I work within a nonprofit industrial complex that does not value the work that I bring. I think I bring something to the Seattle City Council that has not ever been there. And I think it's time that we stop devaluing the work of activists and organizers and actually see that having real activists and organizers in those positions is transformative and will be transformative, and it brings a movement of people. We put out a flyer for a protest on June 3rd, and 12,000 people came out to say, defund the police by 50%, invest in Black communities, and free them all. No one else on the Seattle City Council can do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Snap. Sorry, got a snap to that one right there. One of the things I really want to ask you, because we're talking a lot about connections, ties to the folks that you are with on the ground in your work. But I really want to ask, when we talk about this huge city, right? This is a citywide seat, right? Mm-hmm. What do you do and what do you bring that's going to bring some unity into this? Because we see some huge divides. We saw them throughout the protest movement, beyond the protest movement. We really have experienced some folks are just not willing to change the way the system is. How do you approach those folks?
I think some divides are necessary. They are, they show you where we still have deep work to do. I think sometimes we do ourselves a disservice when we try to force candidates to talk about how they're going to reach across the aisle to folks who continue to actually dehumanize people. James Baldwin says that we can have a conversation about things until the point that your argument actually dehumanizes me. And I think there are some divides that are just simply about issues of how we dehumanize people, and that divide is just going to exist. I think there are other places that are actually a cultural shift that need to happen. We need political education. Folks just have not ever had access to the information. I'm an educator. I'm literally building a course online about abolition for the community to access while I'm teaching a course at Seattle University Law School about abolition, because I believe that in the end, if people were to understand the problems of policing, the problems of the criminal punishment system, its roots in anti-Blackness and anti-indigeneity, that in the end, they would then be able to see why these systems have actually perpetuated harm and be willing to make the shifts that need to happen. So I'm an educator in that regard. I'm also a community organizer. And one thing I think is distinctly missing on the Seattle City Council is someone who can organize our council members.
Something that I've found interesting, and not necessarily just specifically to you and your run here for office, is that there's a lot of people in influence who aren't influencing people. I think that's a good one. I think it's the best way I could put it right there. There's a lot of people in influence who aren't influencing people. There's a lot of influence. I mean, when we talk about even our community as well, there's a lot of people in influence, but probably couldn't get 300 Black people to show up to Garfield High School today. If they put out a call like, I need 300 Black people to show up, they probably couldn't get it, but they're influential. And so there's a conversation we kind of been having here that there's a lot of people in influential positions who aren't influential as well. And speaking of influence, though, one way to be able to gauge the momentum of a campaign is, how's it going? How are I don't know, signups, click-throughs, donations? What's going on?
We're doing amazing. Within the first 24 hours of our campaign, I think we collected something like over 600 signatures. We were well over our goal for fundraising, somewhere like $30,000. As of today, we're above $65,000, where our cash goal that we originally set was $75,000. I think our average donation is somewhere around $50-something. And I don't think that's simply because of just influence. We launched our campaign with mutual aid. The very first event that we did was meeting up with folks where you brought what you could share and you took what you needed. We had a mutual aid exchange, because how could we jump into a race and spend $300,000 on a campaign when people can't eat or pay their rent? And so a huge part of this campaign is going to be mutual aid. It's going to be political education. It's going to be culture shifting and information sharing, because I do understand what you're saying about influence. There are a lot of influential people who actually don't have influence on people. I'm not trying to be a singular influence. I'm trying to be a part of a movement that's making a cultural shift.
Right.
Yeah.
And we get a reoccurring question here in the comments. We don't have a lot of time, but maybe you can explain here. One of the comments here is, I do not hear a reasonable solution for what happens if we abolish police. Can we ask about that? This is like a reoccurring question here, so I want to throw it back out to you.
It's not about what happens if we abolish police. It's about when we create the conditions in which we've rendered policing obsolete. What people need to understand, policing does not stop crime and it does not prevent harm. In fact, what policing often does is respond once crime has already happened. Most people who are survivors of a crime who go through the criminal punishment system will say that they were dissatisfied with what was delivered to them through the criminal punishment system. This is not conjecture, it is actually social science. You can read findings that tell you this about people who are survivors of crimes. The goal is to create the conditions which keep people out of the criminal punishment system or needing to be policed in the first place. This is housing, this is education, this is physical and mental health care, this is clean water and good food. Many crimes that we see happen in Seattle right now are actually crimes of poverty, because we have allowed many people to live in that position. Seattle Municipal Court is all misdemeanor crimes. And many of the people that are in King County Jail from Seattle are in on misdemeanor crimes. Many that the root cause of why they committed that quote unquote crime in the first place was a lack of housing. Our housing affordability crisis is at the root of why people think we need police. One other reason why I know that is when you talk to people who are survivors of domestic violence, what they will tell you is the number one thing they needed was housing, not police intervention. And we've invested more and more over the years in policing than we have in affordable housing.
Yeah.
Right. Even I was going to say even parks. I mean, with the homeless sweeps, that was, I mean, the parks, that's parks responsible. The police were then called in now to sweep people out the park. You know what I'm saying? But because there's a gap between the people who are there in the park who need services or are unhoused and unsheltered, and the only solution that the city is finding in some cases is to send in the police and sweep them out.
Which then leaves people displaced, disheveled, without appropriate paperwork, no access to the few things that created sustainability with. Imagine if we spent the money we spent on sweeps actually caring for folks who are finding shelter in the parks right now during a pandemic, and made sure that people had access to trash disposal, needle disposal, drug user supports, mental health supports. These things could actually change what's happening in encampments until we get to the place where we have enough hotels, enough shelters, and enough affordable housing for everyone who wants to come inside to actually come inside.
Yeah, so true. And I think too, one of the big things that we've really seen, the pandemic hit so hard, is Black and minority owned businesses. And I just want to ask you, because we were asking other candidates around, you know, what kind of measures can you bring to the council to really address how these businesses have been closing in the droves during this pandemic?
I think we have to prioritize investments in Black and minority businesses, whether that's through various types of loan programs or other types of supports that help people build their businesses, or it's even finding ways to forgive commercial rents so that folks who have had their small businesses out in commercial spaces don't lose those businesses because of the cost of commercial rents. I think there's also addressing the fact that a lot of our Black and minority-owned businesses are in their homes. Right? They work from home, they do things from home. So how do we provide the sorts of supports that allow those home businesses to be thriving, whether that's various types of tech support or again, loans? We can't overestimate how far a monetary investment in folks and their businesses goes. And I know the challenge often will then be, well, how do we fund it? That's always a question. How do we fund it? And we need a progressive tax structure. And I know that there are some struggles with the income tax because it has to be flat. The next question is, how do you rebate back to those that are already most impacted by a tax burden? But we have to figure something out when it comes to that. We will be recommending a series of taxes that we can use to fund that. We want to wait to put that platform out a little later in the campaign because we are going to be doing listening posts. We want to sit with small business owners, both who have commercial storefronts and those who work out of their homes, and actually hear from them what would practically help your business be more sustainable. I don't want to pretend that I or anyone else on a staff can fully figure out for small businesses what would make things better for them. And again, the thing I think the city always fails to do is go sit with and talk with and build with people. We write policies about people without people, so then those policies don't achieve the material impacts that we want them to have.
Yeah.
Sorry, are you up in here dropping bars?
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Can you give us 10 more minutes?
Absolutely.
We've gone long here, but I want to talk to you about the COVID recovery and things like that. We're going to take a short break right now, and when we come back, continue our conversation with Nikita Oliver. You're watching the Morning Update Show.
The Seattle Association of Black Journalists presents the Morning Update Show 1-year anniversary special this Friday, March 19th at 7 p.m. Join the Converge Media family as we broadcast live from the State Hotel in downtown Seattle, and we take a look back at the last 12 months of the Morning Update Show and a glance towards the future. This is a night you won't want to miss and definitely won't forget, as we're also joined by Julia Jesse, Besa Gordon, Marcus Harrison Green, Jake Gravbrot, Be Unique, Dre's, Eric Calligraphy, Bobby Stills, Mike Davis, Carlos Imani, Willard Jimerson, G-Prez Aspie, DJ Topspin, and more. Woo! So save the date this Friday, March 19th at 7 p.m. across all Converge Media platforms.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Community Voices returns for 2021 with 2 very special episodes that examine the shifting demographics and cultures of Seattle. Converge Media proudly presents Community Voices, the Vanishing Seattle edition. This is a 2-part special that examines 4 Seattle neighborhoods: the Central District, Chinatown International District, the University District, and Ballard, all Seattle neighborhoods that have experienced great change and displacement due to gentrification, rising rents, and development, as well as found creative ways to stay rooted and resilient. Also, all neighborhoods that have a long and proud history, culture, and traditions that combined help shape the face of the Emerald City as we know it today. The Community Voices episodes will include films plus discussions with local small business owners and community members. These are 2 powerful live episodes that you will not want to miss. So make sure and save the date, March 18th and March 25th at 7 p.m. across all Converge Media platforms. Presented by the City of Seattle Department of Neighborhoods and Vanishing Seattle.
All right, welcome back to the Morning Update Show. That's right, it's a big week for us, as you see right there in those adverts. Thursdays, Vanishing Seattle, special Community Voices episode right there, episode 1. And we're focusing on the International District and the University District. And we're talking about, gentrification, displacement, rising rents. A lot of businesses, let alone people and traditions, have vanished. But we find that there are some that persevere. So we're gonna be talking about that. And then Friday, we can't say this enough, Friday, 7 o'clock, the 1-year anniversary show of the Morning Update. Can you believe it's been a year, Trey?
I know. I mean, it went by so quickly. We've been busy, man.
we have been busy. We're still joined by Nikita Oliver. They were kind enough to go overtime with us. We go overtime often. We got Nikki Barron here today, so we got all the time we need. So Nikita, I want to bring this up here. Let me see. You know, these are handcrafted, by the way. So I'm a
Beautiful.
Seattle virus success shows what could have been done. This is the New York Times by Mike Baker. This was the other day. And this story in the New York Times got a lot of traction nationally. And we found that on the big national news outlets, they were talking about how Seattle has responded to COVID and around some of the success stories in being able to keep really the lowest rate in America amongst the top 30 cities that are out there. One, what are some of the things that the city, and I guess you say the city and county kind of combined, but especially the city has been doing right about during this pandemic? Maybe what are some of the things that could be better? But more importantly as well, I mean, what are some of your thoughts on the recovery?
Yeah, a few things that I think were right. One was how quickly we moved towards shutting down. I know that was a challenge for a lot of people, but just stopping the spread has been important. That being said, I think our city has the privilege of being able to do that because we are a tech city. Many people could move to working from home, and their companies could afford to make that happen. And in fact, we have seen that tech has greatly benefited during this crisis. So there's also, that intersection there has to be acknowledged as a part of our city. I think making strides towards things like free transportation was huge. And in fact, has shown us that free transportation is something we could have been offering people the whole time. I feel like in some ways, the things that we've seen around disability justice and transportation have actually shown us that these things that we've been fighting for a long time have always been possible. And in the midst of a crisis that suddenly affected everyone, white and wealthy folks included, suddenly we could make it a reality. So I really think it's important that we ground ourselves in that understanding. There has been some suspending of certain types of fines and fees. So there was a period of time where there were no parking tickets that people could receive. I think that we need to further suspend those fines and fees and stop being reliant on a city at any level upon using those types of punitive responses as a way of funding our city, because then we actually require those behaviors or those things that we're criminalizing to continue to exist. What do we do moving forward? We need to expand tech. Young people and families should not be worried about their internet shutting down while trying to do school, and should not be worried about whether or not they can get vaccinations because of issues around tech. We have a serious tech issue. A lot of elders have reached out to me personally and asked me to help them sign up for vaccinations because they don't know how to do it on their own. And so as vaccinations roll out, we have a serious in terms of elders, but also racial demographics, we have some serious disproportionality issues to grapple with. Something I think we need to center as we're doing our solution building around our COVID-19 recovery is that our system prior to COVID was deeply flawed. And COVID has merely exacerbated the things that already existed. So for me, this is not really COVID-19 recovery. It is actually us building the system we should have had prior to COVID-19. So we are actually ready the next time another disaster hits. And then we have disaster relief already in place. So it's not a question. So a big piece of this is actually some of the work I've already highlighted to you around being transparent, accountable, and intersectional, but doing that in regards to affordable housing and zoning. If we're going to come out of this crisis well, we need social housing. We need housing that's not dependent upon the private market. The private market actually has no incentive, especially after a crisis, to build more affordable housing because land in some areas may be cheaper. They can buy it cheaper, they can build it, and then they can upsell what those luxury units get for them. So we really need the city and the county to be willing to step in on the development of social housing. We need to expand our urban villages. We know that the climate crisis, the climate catastrophe is going to be huge. We saw this when the sky was nearly blacked out for 4 or 5 days here in Seattle. And so expanding our urban villages, dealing with zoning, having better transportation. One of the major things I've heard from some people is even if there's a vaccination site near them, if they live in a place that does not have east-west transportation, they may not actually be able to get to that vaccination site in a timely manner. So I think this is also revealing to us the deep justice issues around transportation, not just in terms of cost, but in terms of where it exists and how it exists. And food sustainability. And I think a few ways to address food sustainability and health is for us as a city to support a community schools model. And by community schools, it means that within the school exists healthcare, food supports, family support workers. We could help schools also, because many of them have gotten rid of school resource officers, have restorative justice counselors, and build our schools into a place that exists both for food and health sustainability, but also sustainable mutual aid networks. I cannot miss the work that mutual aid has done in our city, where our municipal government actually failed community members through community collaborations responded to each other's needs.
I'll say this, and I'll give it to you, Trey. I'll say this when you say mutual aid, the morning update show, like we once we knew we were going to do the show, we knew that we needed to really target this, especially for our elders and people around COVID. But the inspiration, and we're going to talk about this on Friday, for the morning update show was the Deaf Chef and Chef Tariq at Feed the People. I walked up there from Jackson to Yesler to Soulful Dishes, and I went over there and I saw the Deaf Chef was in there and Chef Tariq and a bunch of chefs. I'm like, what's going on? They were like, man, people need help. The only thing that we know how to do is cook. So we just going to do what we know how to do. And it was that gesture of mutual aid, and the light bulb went off. It was like, well, man, only thing I know how to do is media. We need to do a show. And, you know, so I was just throwing that in there, the act of mutual aid in our community. I mean, a lot of people, they see mutual aid that's, you know, especially these days, it's broadcast everywhere. A lot of stuff promoted on the internet. But this was just walking down the street and seeing like the Deaf Chef and Chef Tariq doing what they do every day, and was really just trying to feed the people. And it was an inspiration for us in launching the morning update show.
And it was a huge part of a lot of folks' survival, whether it was the things that the Deaf Chef and Chef T were doing, or it's COVID-19 Mutual Aid Seattle, which has established a number of funds to help people get groceries and pay rent and support unaccompanied minors and other undocumented peoples. There are tons of mutual aid networks all across King County that have responded to people's immediate needs. And I think the city should actually do work to undergird those networks and support them, because when crisis does hit again, if our end community mutual aid responses are strong, that is just another level of a social safety net that exists for communities, especially marginalized communities.
Well, you know, I think that one of the things here, and I'm really hearing this as a theme for a lot of what you're talking about, is caring for the whole person. You know, working in affordable housing with ACLT, Africatown Community Land Trust, one of the things that I think is so key is we can't just build the places and then people come. We also have to infuse it with the culture of that unity and of that village mentality that so many of us come from in the global majority. That's how the first civilizations were built. I go back to that oftentimes when I'm telling people to see themselves as a part of the solution. And my question to you is how do we infuse the culture that is needed in these spaces that you're talking about building and needing for the city, so that we can ensure that people are not just coming there with all of their traumas, but again, being served as a whole person?
Yeah, I think Africatown Community Land Trust is one place we can learn that from. Two other groups that I think are doing really great work like that. One is Queer the Land. This community of folks, queer and trans people of color, have acquired a piece of land and are literally building a place where they can co-own their labor and co-own the land, and a really dynamic co-op model that is grounded in supporting queer and trans people of color. So it is culturally responsive, and it also challenges these notions around economics that it has to be individual, and actually pushes us towards community collaborations, community care. Another great thing that I know is launching on April 22nd is Got Green is launching a campaign around community held land that has affordable housing, services, and sustainable food sources co-located in those spaces, which really infuses, again, that idea of serving the whole person. It can also be a space, a way to think differently or more holistically about our urban villages, and knowing that land ownership has been a huge part of how many white communities have built their equity. Now we're in the midst of a climate catastrophe, right? So we have to think differently than just family zone or single family zoned areas, and have to be thinking about, what does shared ownership look like? What does shared equity look like? But in a way that leaves no one behind, right? So we really can be growing this in our urban village models, using the work that communities like Africatown Community Land Trust, Queer the Land, and Got Green have already started.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Right. A quick question here before I let you go, and appreciate you going in overtime here. You know, a lot of times, of course, in elections, people make these it's either, you know, left versus right or whatever. And so one of the things is it's like there's other candidates in the race, 2 other candidates, I think, so far. I'm sure there'll probably be more. A citywide seat, competitive this year. But one of the things, and when you look at other media around the city, is like, you know, Nikita Oliver, anti-police, anti-business. You've spoken around the public safety issue, as you said. But what about business? Because we hear people say Nikita Oliver is anti-business or anti-big business.
I'm not anti-business. And I think that big business needs to pay its fair share of taxes. If paying your fair share of taxes means that I'm anti-business, then I'm gonna need to check y'all on how much taxes I pay a year, because I definitely pay my fair share. And so reality is big business is contributing to the climate catastrophe. Big business is contributing to the affordability crisis, but big business doesn't want to contribute to solving either of those issues. And so if asking for taxation makes me anti-big business, I think we really actually have a problem about the way people are seeing things. Reality is, I think large corporations should pay their fair share in taxes so we can make sure that we take care of everyone in our city. Unfortunately, the way that we've done things has allowed corporations to pay 0 to 2% of taxes, while the poorest individuals in our state pay 0 to 17%. We have the most regressive tax structure. So what I am anti is continuing to extract labor from poor people, continuing to extract resources from the earth, and not have folks actually pay their fair share. So one, we can give workers fair wages, fair, healthy working conditions, and honestly, thriving wages, and hours and protections that they deserve. Secondly, we have to address the climate catastrophe. And part of this is going to require big businesses that have been huge contributors to pollution to actually contribute in a way financially that we can do things like get off of natural gases and fossil fuels. And they're going to also have to make the transition themselves. Otherwise, what would be the point in having businesses around anyways, because humans won't be here to use them. So in the long run, making these transitions, taking care of workers, and paying our fair share to ensure that workers can actually live where they work, their families can go to school where they work, is actually better for everyone. So that's not me being anti-big business. That's me being pro-healthy communities, pro-healthy homes, pro-healthy workers, pro-healthy families, and understanding that taxation is a part of that.
Right. And we have our thing here where we asked the candidates for the city of Seattle, what do we need to fight for? What do we need to nurture? What do we need to heal?
We need to fight for the health of everyone in planet to be honored. We need to nurture our young people. And I know some people probably think, of course, Nikita would say that, but I say that because young people have been at the forefront of every social movement that has changed the way that things work. Their zeal, their lack of being locked into certain ways of seeing the world makes it so that they have imaginations and creativity that can push us to the next place. And what do we need to heal? We need to heal ourselves so we can be a part of healing each other. And I mean that I mean that because if we don't get our healing work together as our individual selves, addressing the places where we carry isms, where we carry internalized oppression, then we're never going to be able to see the other human in front of us as having the same value we view ourselves as having, because we don't view ourselves as having even enough value to heal ourselves. So I really think pushing folks and creating spaces, you have to create healing spaces for people to be able to do that work. So then we as a whole people, as collaborations, as community, then we can heal together.
All right, you can let people know, this is an opportunity. How can people get up with your campaign?
You can go to www.Nikita, Nikita, or Nikita, NIKKITA, We got them both. Join us. You can volunteer, you can donate, you can be at mutual aid events, you can come to listening posts. But honestly, we just want to share space with you and build, because we know that this is an opportunity for a movement, and we don't want to be a campaign that gets into office and is changed more by the office then the office is changed by us. And one way we preserve that accountability is by being in close relationship with our communities.
All right. Nikita Oliver, thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you for staying overtime. Appreciate it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, we haven't gone this long in a long time, but man, appreciate you dropping in. This is your first interview?
This was my first one. I had to do it with Converge, you know.
All right. Well, we appreciate it. So now, you know, we're going to have a candidate forum here pretty soon. We haven't put it together. And so we'll make sure and invite you back for a candidate forum. And that's where I'm coming with the subsection paraphrase of percentage of this and that and yada yada. So there's a lot of stuff to talk about with this city. But thank you for joining us. We're gonna take a quick break right now. Oh, we still got it. There
we go.
There you go. We're gonna take a quick break right now. When we come back, the Morning Update Show continues.
The Seattle Association of Black Journalists presents the Morning Update Show 1-year anniversary special this Friday, March 19th at 7 p.m. Join the Converge Media family as we broadcast live from the State Hotel in downtown Seattle, and we take a look back at the last 12 months of the Morning Update Show and a glance towards the future. This is a night you won't want to miss and definitely won't forget, as we're also joined by Julia Jesse, Besa Gordon, Marcus Harrison Green, Jake Gravbrot, Be Unique, Dre's, Eric Calligraphy, Bobby Stills, Mike Davis, Carlos Imani, Willard Jimerson, G-Prez Aspie, DJ Topspin, and more. Woo! So save the date this Friday, March 19th at 7 p.m. across all Converge Media platforms.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Community Voices returns for 2021 with 2 very special episodes that examine the shifting demographics and cultures of Seattle. Converge Media proudly presents Community Voices, the Vanishing Seattle edition. This is a 2-part special that examines 4 Seattle neighborhoods: the Central District, Chinatown International District, the University District, and Ballard, all Seattle neighborhoods that have experienced great change and displacement due to gentrification, rising rents, and development, as well as found creative ways to stay rooted and resilient. Also, all neighborhoods that have a long and proud history, culture, and traditions that combined help shape the face of the Emerald City as we know it today. The Community Voices episodes will include films plus discussions with local small business owners and community members. These are 2 powerful live episodes that you will not want to miss. So make sure and save the date, March 18th and March 25th at 7 p.m. across all Converge Media platforms. Presented by the City of Seattle Department of Neighborhoods and Vanishing Seattle.
All right, welcome back to the Morning Update Show. Oh, we went long today.
Overtime.
Yeah, we went overtime. There we go. Well, no, the monitor was like flickering or something. All right, so yeah, Nikita Oliver.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they came on here, you know, really speaking their truth. And again, I think that when we talk to all of these candidates, we see how they're bringing their lived experience into, you know, their candidacy and into their platform. I think that was, you know, I'm glad that we went a little long. I'm glad that we got a lot of our questions, you know, all the ones that we have been brewing, you know, and even some from the audience. It was good to get that kind of, you know, response from Nikita.
Yeah, no. You know, all the candidates are welcome, and there's actually another candidate running announced for support for position 4. So I'm trying to follow up on that. And tomorrow, speaking of candidates, this is handcrafted.
Here we go.
Andrew Ace Houston, candidate for mayor, and so I wanted to talk to Ace because Ace is cashing in on those democracy dollars. Yeah, what? I mean, man, Ace rolling in the dough with them democracy bucks. I mean, people are getting out. I'm gonna bring my democracy dollars tomorrow. They're at the crib. I haven't opened them up yet. You know what I'm saying? I got $100 to spend how I want. $25, it's 4 $25 vouchers, right? And so you take the voucher, and that's how you can fund the campaign. Like Seattle's innovative in that way. So it's like basically, if you meet the threshold of support, where basically you show the city that, okay, you have some support, then you qualify for the democracy dollars. And yeah, people can, so you can give someone the whole 100, you can give 25 to 4 candidates, however you want to do it. But Ace, let me put this back up here. Pow! Man, But they say people put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, there we go. It's a great way for the city to be innovative in that regard. I think many cities in King County can learn from some of this innovation that Seattle is doing. I'll just say that.
Yeah, no, of course. All right, we're getting ready to get out of here for today. Man, I want to tell you how much we appreciate you. We thank you. We're looking forward to you joining us at 7 o'clock on Thursday for Vanishing Seattle. For Community Voices, the Vanishing Seattle episode 1 with the University District and Chinatown International District. And of course, Friday at 7 o'clock is the Morning Update Show 1 year anniversary. Any last words, Trey Holiday?
I'm just looking forward to this week. We started with such great energy. I love it. Y'all don't even know. Before we hit the cameras, we got the music going. You know what I mean? We're really feeling good. And I just want to give those feelings to all of you out there. It may be a little bit rainy today, but that's all right. Keep your spirits lifted.
All right. As usual, want to remind everybody to go forward in your purpose and go forward in your humanity. Until tomorrow at 11 a.m. Peace.
Lift every voice and sing till earth in heaven ring with the harmonies of let our rejoicing rise as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rise.